How's it going, everybody? Once again, great access to our 35th District representatives and Representative Travis Couture on the line now. How you doing, Travis?
Good. How are you?
I am well. Last week, we talked about your House Bill 2233, and this is regarding fentanyl and protecting the kids from fentanyl. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families had a bit of a response to your bill. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So we did a we did a article with one of the reporters with Center Square, and that reporter went out and asked DCYF to comment. So Department of Children, Youth, and Families, for those who don't know, they do all the foster care, the CPS, everything else, childcare in this state. Everything that's broken in this state falls under DCYF, it seems like. But they responded to that reporter and basically said they oppose the bill because they think it's essentially safer to keep kids in homes where there is hard drugs like fentanyl and meth present, which falls right in line with what we've been seeing. And that's safer than removing kids from parents to keep them safe. And I just think that, I live in reality. We have to be able to remove kids from those situations and keep them safe. And the numbers don't lie. They're dying at unprecedented rates as a result of that right now. And I just think it's tone deaf, and it's frankly, it's just outrageous. And this is an example of how radical ideology in Olympia affects policy and policy decisions, and even the actions of our state agencies and departments. And we have to be able to set those ideologies aside and look at the facts and look at the map and see the stories. And right now it's just story after story after story of young kids. And really, in this case, although some older children, die or are part of near fatalities, they'll call it, where they almost die. But really, the largest number of the deaths are infants and toddlers. And I got 4 kids, and I know you got kids, Jeff, and you know that when babies and toddlers are, crawling around the house, I mean, they're getting into things, and you got to keep an eye on them. And if you're a parent on fentanyl, you can't watch your kids. I mean, we've seen it kind of, just on the news or on our streets, right? Where, these people, they, after using that drug, they're almost kind of just zombed out. They're zombies, for lack of a better term. And that's sad. You do want to be able to help those parents on the back end. Hopefully you can get them clean and sober and help them get the treatment that they need, so that someday they can reunite with their families once they're clean and sober. But you got to be able to take the keys away. And so I'm kind of outraged by the stance of DCYF on that, because I think we talked about it before. If we don't hit a bullseye on it this session, then we gavel out, and we're going to see another 85 to 100 child deaths in this category until we can gavel back in next January in 2025. And is that what we're willing to accept? I'm not. And so I'm in the headspace that I'm just going to war for these kids, because it's just totally unacceptable. And there's a lot of different things you can kind of apply this radical thought process to in Olympia, but we shouldn't be applying it to young kids when they're dying,
When it comes to the bill that you proposed here, and again, I guess in response to what they were saying, would you be advocating for the children to be pulled out of the home system entirely, or look for another family member, a secondary grandparent or aunt and uncle in these types of situations? Or I guess from their saying too, we don't want to have more kids in home, like youth homes or whatever they would call them. You know what I'm trying to say here, but more with the family or extended family structure.
Yeah, and that's been kind of for years now, been kind of a goal of DCYF, is to try to stop out-of-home placements, right? But to your point, we do have a kinship care system where you can be placed with grandma, grandpa, an aunt or uncle, or or something like that, right? So you can be placed with other family, and even our Native American friends. So there's some sensitivity to removing a Native American child from a Native American home because of drugs. But there's something called IPQA where they get placed with another Native American family, right? So we've done a lot of work to make sure that we do the least amount of harm when we do an out-of-home placement. Now, sometimes the older kids, when there's nowhere to go, you've heard of probably like DCYF placing these kids in cars and hotel rooms, and they had a lawsuit against them years ago for this. And but really what it boils down to is the leadership at DCYF is not doing a good job. And this is not even something that I'm just saying. This is something that their own workers are saying. So over the interim, I went to the Washington State Federation of State Employees, their annual convention, and everybody had a button that said toss Ross. And if you don't know, Ross Hunter is the secretary of DCYF, and he's a Jay Inslee appointee. And he used to be a Democrat member of the House in the legislature here years ago. But since DCYF was created in 2017 to take over in the space from DSHS, it was created to solve a lot of these problems that DSHS had, but they've only actually gotten worse. We proposed things like having an oversight board, but the governor vetoed our bill for an oversight board on DCYF last year, so we're running it again. We got stuff to like my colleague Representative McClintock has a bill to help foster care communications because it's so fragmented what foster parents can do, and we have kind of a little bit of a crisis with foster parent people aren't signing up to be foster parents right now. So we're starting to have less and less, but so at some point everything starts to become a systemic problem, and to fix a big cultural or systemic problem you need the right leadership at the top, right? And so nothing's perfect, but I maintain that at the end of the day, even if you want to try to prevent out-of-home placements, which is what they said, you still got to make sure the kid is alive, right? You can't have them in a place where just a couple weeks ago, a 4-year-old girl in Kennewick died. She had ingested 2 fentanyl pills and had one stuck up her nose while her parents were doing drugs in the bathroom. And the father actually had a no contact order that he had been violating multiple times. And then also last year, a 3-year-old boy was killed by his mother under CPS supervision while CPS is supervising the family, even though they knew she was smoking meth, but she tortured and killed her own son and left the body laying there. Was terrible. It's just terrible. And I mean, you can only see so many of those until you got to say enough's enough, right? We got to do something different.
When it comes to these types of changes and big changes in departments, is it better to work on I guess kind of the federal term is the omnibus, like a very large bill that covers different aspects of this, or is it more important to kind of work on case by case, bill by bill, and try to chip away at some of the changes that you'd like to make?
Yeah. So I mentioned like they do many things. ESIT, early support for infants and toddlers. They do the ECAP system, the early learning preschool stuff, and they also do childcare, CPS, foster care. So they have a lot under that umbrella, right? And one of the things about the House is like you can't do multiple subjects, right, in a bill.
Right, that's right. That's right. I remember that now.
And so you can kind of sometimes wedge more things in there, but it has to fall under the title of the bill. And that also means you can't amend things that are out of the scope of the title of the bill. And sometimes, have a controversial bill and you'll see, maybe me, I'll drop an amendment on it and the speaker will gavel and say it's out of order because it's out of scope, right? So that happens sometimes, and sometimes it gets really legalese, right, about whether it fits in the scope or not. But I think to answer your question though, like whether it's a big bill or a small bill, it doesn't actually matter the size of the bill. You can make a one-line change sometimes to things and make a dramatic difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like in this case, what we're saying is in court, when CPS goes to remove the child because, well, social workers are complaining they don't have the tools to be able to remove when they see these things happen. And that's true, right? Because they go to court and the judge will say, well, there's no imminent harm in the law, right? So what my bill does, it says, hey, if you're doing this and the kid is at danger, then this is considered an imminent harm. And yeah, it could be complicated. You start removing some of these kids, and then you got to find maybe an out-of-home placement or kinship care or something like that. But at least they're still alive,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's kind of my stance. And I there's a lot of things I'm tackling in that space. Childcare is one of them. I know that animates a lot of people in our district, and the reason is because we live in what's called a childcare desert. And if you're not familiar with that, you can kind of look on a map. There's even websites for it. But these are areas of our state where childcare is very rare or doesn't exist, or there's just not enough of it. It's not affordable. And if you look on a map, it's typically the rural areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
The urban areas still have a little bit of a desert mentality, but not nearly to the extent that a rural district like the 35th will have. And so I've got stuff that really focuses on trying to make childcare attainable, affordable, and especially for babies, because those are the hardest category to find childcare for,
Right.
to really give us the relief that we need so that, if mom wants to go have a career, then she can, right? And really, if, briefly, I think what's getting in the way is DCYF has created this kind of what they call their quality policy. And what I argue is if you go way too far, setting up regulations and rules for quality of childcare, then you've basically made it so unaffordable that we just can't build it in our districts, right? And if you don't have childcare in your district, then what happens? People still find childcare maybe, but it's under the radar, right? It's kind of black market childcare. And my argument is then there is no quality and there is no safety and rules, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so by giving some relief, and I have a bill that gives relief for childcare deserts. If you're in a childcare desert, the counties would have more say into how to set up an ordinance to tailor a childcare system with some basic rules and understandings that we all understand we must follow, background checks and etc. That they can go tailor this to their communities that works for them so that people can start having childcare in their childcare deserts, right? And so I'm actually surprisingly going to get a hearing on that bill next in the next coming couple weeks. So I didn't think I'd get a hearing on that because it's a very different approach than what the majority party would like to do. But I am thankful to get a hearing. And as a matter of fact, Jeff, I'm kind of surprised. I've got a lot of bills. I think I have over 15 of them now. And I would say the majority of them are getting hearings. And I'm calculating kind of in my head, at least 7 bills I think are going to be passable for a short session and only my second session. I think that's pretty incredible,
Do you think that's
my
because you're coming at it, excuse me, again as freshman coming into the, kind of your first term here, and so you haven't been inundated with some of the old school rules here, or your youth is allowing you to look at things in a different way than some of maybe your predecessors? How does that, what do you attribute that to then?
Um, and yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging about myself, but I think what people tell me and what people tell others is that I just work hard. And what that means, I guess, kind of on the ground in reality is, and I tell people this, the legislature is supposed to be a part-time job, right? but it's not. You're someone's representative 24/7.
Hmm.
And and I'll tell you, Jeff, I've never been really good at doing part-time jobs. And so I treat it like a full-time job that it is. And you know how long I've been talking about state government and kind of involved in this space. And it took a long time for me to get here. So like the reverence I have for the job that I do, it's really at the top of my list. I go stand on the House floor. I have a different feeling, of respect, and I really want to do something great. And I'm kind of self-actualizing that way. But also, there's big problems in our state, and a lot of those problems slip into our district, right? And I'm not going to wait around for them to solve themselves, right? And so I just go like, sixth gear at all times. And
You'll go
and my
until
and
someone
Dan,
says, "Whoa, whoa, slow down a little bit here."
yeah, my seatmates sometimes tell me to slow down. They don't want me to burn out, but I told them I was burnt out like a decade ago.
Sure,
And
sure.
so,
You're on your fifth wind here or something like that.
yeah, exactly.
Let's move on to some transportation issues. And if you haven't had any updates on this, then that's great. But back in the middle of November, you met with a group of folks up in the north part of Mason County in regards to the Belfair Bypass, the Highway 3 freight corridor, whatever we're calling it now. Have you had any updates on that since you've been in Olympia?
Yeah, so we had a really great town hall up there in Belfair, and actually, I feel a little bit bad because we set it up at the hub, right, the senior center,
Uh-huh.
which is a really great space, and the North Mason Community Voice does their thing up there too.
Oh yeah.
But we didn't anticipate, we thought there'd be a lot of people. But we didn't anticipate how many people there would be, and people were parked down the highway and down the street,
Yeah.
and so next time I'll just say for everybody that we'll do it at the high school or something like that, where we can fit more people.
Yeah, it was
But
standing room only there on that
oh
one.
yeah, and it was great. And so I think the bottom line is we're still on track.
Okay.
Right. So when we get, gavelled in this year, there were some talks like, hey, of course we're in a supplemental budget. We got to do some maintenance level stuff. Some of the transportation projects are suffering. And Dan Griffey, he sits on transportation committee, so we kind of divide and conquer. I'm on approps, he's on transportation, and you know, I was asking him, is our project, the Belfair Bypass, the freight corridor, is that one under threat? And the answer is no.
Good.
So we're still green to go, and I'm super happy about that. We've advocated very hard for that, and when we had that town hall and others, it was the number one project that people wanted in our district, and that includes all three counties. And so it's going to be great. I know that coming soon, they're going to have their environmental, I forget what it's called, not environmental impact, but their study basically completed, which means that they can have the green light to go purchase properties in preparation for construction. So we're still on track, and I'm really proud of that because I've been in North Mason a long time. I've had to wait in that traffic and see the crashes on some of those intersections up there. And I am super excited to when I come, because I work in Kitsap. So when I come home, I want to be locked into traffic forever. And
Right,
that would be
right.
super great.
And
So
there's
I always
no
tell people no one cares more about it than I do.
and
So,
and there's no real concern that it's going to impact any of those businesses in the Belfair corridor right on 3, right? I mean, those will still be hopping and popping.
yeah, yeah. And as a matter of fact, it might help them more. I could tell you personally that if I'm driving home from work and I'm locked in bumper to bumper traffic and I'm frustrated, I'm not pulling off to a business in Belfair because I'm stuck in traffic, right? I'm just angry.
Yeah,
And
right.
so, but that's my own personal thought. But, a lot of people say, hey, we've studied this enough. We've studied this enough. We studied it to death. Well, some of those studies were to study that, right?
Yeah.
And as you look around some of the other bypasses in our region that have been built in recent memory, they also did not hurt their local thing that the city or town they were bypassing.
Sure.
I think in the past they've planned those wrong, like distant past, they planned those wrongly and it could have hurt. But I would just rest everyone assured that I don't think that it's going to hurt Belfair at all.
Very good. Very good. Representative Travis Couture, representing the 35th, again online at traviscouture.houserepublicans.wa.gov. We'll have this interview as well on our podcast page that you can download, and you can always get in touch with them at the website that I mentioned. Travis, thank you so much for some time this morning. Good to talk with you, buddy.
Thanks, Jeff. You too. See
Bye.
ya.